Marcus had always known he looked different. Born with a rare condition that left deep scars across the right side of his face and a slightly twisted jaw, he had learned early in life that people stared. Some whispered behind their hands, others looked away quickly when he caught them watching. At 28 years old, he had built a comfortable routine that kept him mostly invisible. Every morning, Marcus walked the same route to his job at the community library. He kept his head down, wearing a baseball cap pulled low and a scarf that covered part of his face even in warm weather. The library was his sanctuary. Between the tall shelves of books, he felt safe. Children who came for story time didn't seem to notice his appearance the way adults did. They just wanted to hear about brave knights and magical kingdoms. On this particular Tuesday morning, Marcus was running late. His alarm hadn't gone off and he had to rush to catch the bus. In his hurry, he forgot his usual scarf and had to pull his cap down even lower. The bus was crowded, filled with commuters heading to work and students going to school. Marcus found a seat near the back and tried to make himself small. At the next stop, a woman in an expensive coat got on. She was talking loudly on her phone about some important meeting she was rushing to attend. The bus lurched forward and she stumbled slightly, her eyes scanning for an empty seat. Her gaze landed on Marcus, and for a moment their eyes met directly. The woman's face changed instantly. Her expression shifted from mild annoyance to something much uglier. She stared openly at his scars, her mouth slightly open in what looked like disgust. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and turned toward the window, hoping she would look away, but she didn't. Instead, she moved closer, still talking on her phone but clearly intending for Marcus to hear her words. "You wouldn't believe the kinds of people they let on public transportation these days," she said loudly into her phone. "There's this absolutely hideous man sitting right near me. It's honestly disturbing. They should really have separate sections for people like that." The entire bus seemed to go quiet. Marcus felt every eye turn toward him. His hands began to shake and he gripped the edge of his seat tightly. He wanted to disappear, to melt into the floor and never be seen again. The woman continued her cruel commentary, describing his appearance in harsh detail to whoever was on the other end of her call. An elderly man sitting across the aisle shifted uncomfortably. A teenage girl near the front looked back with sympathy in her eyes but said nothing. The bus driver glanced in his rearview mirror with a frown but kept driving. Marcus realized that nobody was going to say anything. They would all just sit there and let this woman tear him apart with her words. When the bus finally reached his stop, Marcus practically ran off. He could hear the woman still talking as the doors closed behind him. His heart was pounding so hard he thought it might burst. He stood at the bus stop for several minutes, trying to calm himself down before walking the remaining 3 blocks to the library. As he unlocked the heavy wooden doors of the old building, Marcus made a decision. He would request to work in the back room, cataloging returned books where nobody could see him. He would eat his lunch alone in the storage area. He would avoid the children's reading corner where parents might object to his appearance. He would make himself even more invisible than before. The morning incident played over and over in his mind as he went through his routine of checking, returned books, and updating the computer system. Every time he remembered the woman's words, he felt a fresh wave of shame wash over him. By lunchtime, he had convinced himself that she was right. Maybe he was too disturbing to be around normal people. Maybe he should just accept that this was how the world saw him. But as Marcus was eating his sandwich in the quiet back office, he heard a commotion near the front desk. Someone was crying and there were raised voices. Despite his resolve to stay hidden, his natural instinct to help others kicked in. He set down his lunch and walked toward the sound. Near the children's section, Marcus found a small boy, maybe 6 years old, sobbing uncontrollably. The child was alone, spinning in circles and calling out for his mama. Several library patrons stood nearby looking concerned but unsure what to do. The head librarian, Mrs. Chen, was trying to calm the boy down, but he was too upset to listen. Marcus approached slowly, his heart still heavy from the morning's humiliation. The little boy had dark, curly hair and was wearing a dinosaur t-shirt that was now wet with tears. When he saw Marcus coming closer, the child looked up with wide, frightened eyes. "Hey there, buddy," Marcus said softly, crouching down to the boy's level. "What's your name?" The boy hiccuped through his tears. "Tommy," he whispered. "Hi, Tommy, I'm Marcus." "Can you tell me what happened?" Tommy wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "I was looking at the picture books, and when I turned around, Mama was gone. I can't find her anywhere. Fresh tears started flowing down his cheeks. Marcus felt a familiar ache in his chest. He remembered being lost as a child, that terrible feeling of being alone and scared in a big world. "It's okay, Tommy, we're going to find your mama. I promise. She's probably looking for you right now." Mrs. Chen came over with a concerned expression. "I've already called security to help us search the building," she told Marcus quietly. His mother must have stepped outside or gone to another floor. Marcus nodded and turned back to Tommy. "You know what? While we wait for the security guard to find your mama, would you like to hear a story? I know some really good ones about brave dinosaurs." Tommy's crying slowed a little. "You know dinosaur stories?" "I know the best dinosaur stories," Marcus said with a gentle smile. "There's one about a little dinosaur who got separated from his family, but found his way home by being very smart and very brave." As Marcus began telling the story, using different voices for each dinosaur character, Tommy became completely absorbed. Other children who had been nearby drifted over to listen. Soon there was a small circle of kids sitting on the colorful carpet, all captivated by Marcus's storytelling. He had a natural gift for making stories come alive. He used his hands to show how big the dinosaurs were, made sound effects for their roars, and created suspense that had the children leaning forward with anticipation. For the first time all day, Marcus forgot about his appearance and the cruel words from the bus. He was just focused on entertaining these children and helping Tommy feel better. 20 minutes later, a frantic woman came rushing into the children's section. "Tommy, oh my goodness, Tommy!" She ran toward her son, who jumped up and ran into her arms. "Mama, Mama, this nice man told us the best dinosaur story ever," Tommy said, pointing at Marcus with excitement. The woman, who was young with kind eyes, looked at Marcus with overwhelming gratitude. "Thank you so much for taking care of him. I just stepped outside to take an important phone call from my ex-husband about custody arrangements. I thought Tommy was safely looking at books, but I should never have left him alone." "It's okay," Marcus said, standing up and unconsciously pulling his cap down lower. He was scared, but he's a brave little guy. The woman noticed his gesture and the way he seemed to want to hide his face. Her expression softened even more. "You were so wonderful with him, and with all these children. You're a natural storyteller." Marcus felt his cheeks burn, but this time it wasn't from shame. It was from the unfamiliar warmth of genuine appreciation. "I work here at the library. It's part of my job." "Well, you're very good at it," she said firmly. "Tommy, what do you say to Mr. Marcus?" Tommy ran over and hugged Marcus around the legs. "Thank you for the dinosaur story. Will you tell more stories tomorrow?" Marcus looked down at the little boy's trusting face and felt something shift inside his chest. "If you come back tomorrow, I'll have a new story ready for you." As Tommy and his mother left, several other parents approached Marcus. They had been watching the whole scene unfold and were impressed by how naturally he had handled the situation. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected began to happen. Word spread among the local parents about the library employee who was amazing with children. Tommy returned the next day as promised, bringing his grandmother with him. Soon, other families started showing up specifically during Marcus's shifts, hoping to catch one of his impromptu storytelling sessions. Marcus found himself looking forward to work in a way he never had before. Instead of hiding in the back room, he started spending more time in the children's section. He created a small reading corner with comfortable cushions and began hosting official storytime sessions twice a week. The attendance grew steadily as more and more families discovered his gift. The children never seemed to notice his scars. They were too busy being transported to magical worlds filled with talking animals, brave heroes, and exciting adventures. Some of the younger kids would even reach up to touch his face while he was reading, the same way they might touch a favorite stuffed animal. Their innocent acceptance slowly began to heal something deep inside Marcus that had been broken for years. But it wasn't just the children who were changing his life. Their parents were beginning to see past his appearance too. Mrs. Rodriguez, whose twin daughters loved his princess stories, started bringing him homemade cookies. Mr. Peterson, a single father of a shy little girl named Emma, always made a point to chat with Marcus about books and recommend new stories. One afternoon, Marcus was restocking shelves when he overheard two mothers talking near the picture book section. "I don't understand why some people judge others by their appearance," one was saying. "That man Marcus is one of the kindest people I've ever met. My son asks about him every day." "I know exactly what you mean," the other replied. "Emma was so scared of strangers when we first started coming here. But Marcus has this gentle way about him that made her feel safe immediately. She actually looks forward to library visits now. Marcus felt a lump form in his throat. These women were talking about him the same way the cruel woman on the bus had, but their words were filled with warmth and respect instead of disgust. He realized that maybe the bus incident had been about that woman's character, not his appearance. The breakthrough moment came on a busy Saturday afternoon. Marcus was in the middle of telling a story about a dragon who was afraid of fire when he noticed a commotion near the entrance. The same woman from the bus had walked in with what appeared to be her young nephew. She was dressed in another expensive outfit and talking loudly on her phone, just as she had been that terrible morning. Marcus felt his stomach drop. His first instinct was to stop the story and retreat to the back room. He didn't want to face her again, didn't want to risk another public humiliation in front of all these families who had come to trust him. But as he hesitated, little Tommy tugged on his sleeve. "Mr. Marcus, what happens next? Does the dragon learn to breathe fire?" Marcus looked down at Tommy's eager face, then around at the circle of children all waiting for the story to continue. These kids were counting on him. The parents had brought their children here specifically to see him. For the first time in his life, people were depending on him not despite his appearance, but because of who he was as a person. He took a deep breath and continued the story. His voice grew stronger and more confident as he described how the little dragon found courage he didn't know he had. As he spoke, he noticed the woman with the phone getting closer. Her nephew had apparently spotted the storytelling circle and was trying to drag his aunt over to listen. "Aunt Michelle, look, that man is telling stories. Can we listen?" The little boy pleaded. The woman looked over and her expression changed the moment she recognized Marcus. Her face went through several emotions quickly: surprise, recognition, and then something that might have been embarrassment. But her nephew was insistent, pulling her toward the group of children. Marcus finished the dragon story and was about to dismiss the group when the little boy raised his hand eagerly. "Can you tell another one, please?" Before Marcus could answer, Tommy spoke up loudly. "Mr. Marcus tells the best stories in the whole world. He's the nicest person ever." Several other children chimed in with agreement, and their parents smiled and nodded. Marcus noticed the woman, Michelle, watching this interaction with growing amazement. Her nephew had already plopped down on the carpet with the other children, clearly expecting another story. Marcus decided to tell one more story, a tale about a knight who learned that true strength comes from kindness, not from winning battles. As he spoke, he could feel Michelle's eyes on him, but this time her gaze felt different. She wasn't staring with disgust or making cruel comments. Instead, she seemed to be really listening, watching how gently he interacted with the children and how they responded to him with pure affection. When the story ended, the children applauded enthusiastically. Michelle's nephew jumped up and ran to her. "Aunt Michelle, did you hear that story? It was amazing. Can we come back tomorrow?" Michelle looked uncomfortable, glancing between her nephew and Marcus. "We'll see, sweetie. We need to go now." But as she started to leave, something unexpected happened. Emma, the shy little girl whose father brought her every week, had dropped her favorite stuffed rabbit near the door. Michelle noticed it and picked it up, clearly intending to return it. But when she approached Marcus to ask about returning the toy, Emma burst into tears. "My bunny. I can't sleep without my bunny," Emma cried, reaching toward Michelle but staying close to her father. "It's okay, sweetheart," Marcus said gently, kneeling down to Emma's level. "This nice lady found your bunny for you." Michelle stood frozen for a moment, holding the stuffed rabbit. Emma was too shy to take it from a stranger, even though she desperately wanted her toy back. The little girl looked back and forth between Marcus and her father, clearly distressed. "Would you like me to give it to her?" Marcus asked Michelle quietly. Michelle nodded and handed him the rabbit. But as their hands touched briefly during the exchange, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I owe you an apology." Marcus looked up at her, surprised. "What for?" "The bus. A few weeks ago, I said terrible things about you." Her voice was shaking slightly. "I was having the worst day of my life. I had just found out my ex-husband was trying to get full custody of Jake, and I was angry and scared and taking it out on everyone around me. But that's no excuse for what I said." The entire children's section had gone quiet. Parents were pretending not to listen, but Marcus could feel their attention. Emma had gotten her bunny back and was now hiding behind her father's legs, but even she seemed to sense the importance of this moment. "I watched you with these children today," Michelle continued. "I saw how kind you are, how much they love you. I realized that the ugly person on that bus wasn't you. It was me." Marcus stood up slowly, still holding eye contact with her. He had imagined this moment many times over the past few weeks. What he would say if he ever saw her again. How he would make her understand how much her words had hurt him. But now that it was happening, he found he didn't want revenge or even an elaborate apology. "We all have bad days," he said simply. "I appreciate you saying that." Michelle's eyes filled with tears. "I don't deserve your kindness. After what I said about you, after how cruel I was." "Everyone deserves kindness," Marcus replied, and he realized he truly meant it. "That's something I've learned from working with these kids. They don't see the things adults see. They just see whether someone is nice to them or not." Jake tugged on his aunt's coat. "Aunt Michelle, why are you crying?" "Did the story make you sad?" Michelle wiped her eyes and looked down at her nephew. "No, sweetie. The story was beautiful. I'm crying because sometimes grown-ups need to learn important lessons, and this nice man just taught me one." Mr. Peterson, Emma's father, spoke up from nearby. "Marcus teaches all of us important lessons. My daughter used to be afraid of everyone, but he showed her that some people are safe to trust." Other parents began sharing their own stories. Mrs. Rodriguez talked about how her shy twin daughters had blossomed since starting story time. Another mother mentioned how her son, who had autism and struggled with social situations, felt completely comfortable with Marcus because he never judged or pushed too hard. As Michelle listened to these testimonials, her expression changed completely. The woman who had called Marcus hideous was beginning to understand that she had encountered someone truly special that day on the bus, and she had been too blinded by her own prejudices and problems to see it. The following week, Michelle returned to the library with Jake. She arrived early before story time was scheduled to begin and approached Marcus nervously at the front desk. She was carrying a large gift bag and looked as if she hadn't slept much. "I hope it's okay that we came back," she said hesitantly. "Jake hasn't stopped talking about the dragon story all week." Marcus smiled warmly. "Of course it's okay. Children are always welcome here." Michelle set the gift bag on the counter. "I brought something for you. It's not enough to make up for what I did, but I wanted you to have it anyway." Inside the bag was a beautiful leather-bound collection of classic children's stories, along with a handwritten note. Marcus opened the card and read, "To Marcus, thank you for showing me what real beauty looks like. You have a gift that brings joy to so many children. I hope these stories will help you continue spreading that magic. With sincere apologies and deep respect, Michelle." Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. "This is too much. You didn't need to." "Yes, I did," Michelle interrupted gently. "I needed to do something positive after putting so much negativity into the world that day." As they talked, Jake wandered over to the children's section and began looking at picture books. Other families started arriving for story time, and Marcus could see the familiar excitement building among the children as they spotted him. "I should go start the session," Marcus said, but Michelle caught his arm gently. "Could I ask you something? Jake's been having a really hard time with the divorce. His father and I have been fighting a lot, and Jake has started acting out at school. Would it be possible for him to come to story time regularly? I think being around your positive energy might help him." Marcus was touched by her request. "Of course. Every child deserves a safe place where they can just be a kid." Over the next several weeks, Michelle and Jake became regular attendees at story time. Marcus watched as the little boy gradually came out of his shell, going from a quiet, anxious child to someone who laughed freely and even volunteered to help with simple tasks during the sessions. Michelle, too, began to change. She started volunteering to help organize the children's area, bringing snacks for the kids and even assisting with craft projects. Marcus learned that she was actually a graphic designer who had been going through a difficult divorce and custody battle. The stress had made her bitter and quick to lash out at others. "I was so consumed with my own problems that I forgot how to see other people as human beings," she confided to Marcus one afternoon while they were setting up chairs for story time. "That day on the bus, I was so angry about my life that I took it out on you. It was inexcusable." "We all carry invisible burdens," Marcus replied thoughtfully. "I spent years hiding from the world because of how I look. But these children taught me that hiding doesn't protect you. It just keeps you from experiencing the good things life has to offer. Their friendship grew slowly but steadily. Michelle discovered that Marcus was incredibly well-read, with a deep knowledge of literature and storytelling techniques. She learned that he had studied education in college but had been too self-conscious about his appearance to pursue teaching. Instead, he had taken the library job thinking it would allow him to stay in the background. "You're wasting your talents hiding back here," Michelle told him one day. "Have you ever thought about doing storytelling events at schools or community centers?" Marcus shook his head. "I could never do that. Adults aren't as accepting as children. They would focus on how I look instead of listening to the stories." "That's not true," Michelle said firmly. "I'm an adult and I was wrong about you. But look at me now. Sometimes people need a chance to see past their first impressions." She convinced him to start small, offering to help organize a special storytelling event at the library. Together, they created an evening program called Stories Under the Stars in the library's small garden area. Marcus would tell stories while Michelle designed beautiful illustrated programs and helped with publicity. The first event was attended by about 20 people, mostly the regular Storytime families. But word spread quickly through the community about the magical evening of storytelling they had experienced. The second event drew 40 people, including several teenagers and adults without children who had simply heard about Marcus's gift for bringing stories to life. As the Stories Under the Stars events grew in popularity, Marcus found himself becoming something of a local celebrity. The local newspaper wrote a feature article about his storytelling abilities, focusing on his natural talent and the positive impact he was having on the community. The article mentioned his appearance briefly but respectfully, treating it as just one aspect of his life, rather than defining him by it. Michelle had helped him prepare for the interview, coaching him on how to speak confidently about his work and his passion for storytelling. She had also taken professional photos of him during one of his story sessions, capturing the joy and engagement on the children's faces as they listened to him. These photos accompanied the article, showing Marcus exactly as he was, a gifted storyteller surrounded by happy children. The response to the article was overwhelming. The library received calls from schools asking if Marcus could visit their classrooms. Community centers wanted to book him for special events. A local children's hospital reached out, wondering if he would be willing to visit young patients who were confined to their beds. At first, Marcus was terrified. The idea of performing outside his safe space at the library felt impossible. "What if people stare? What if parents complain? What if the children are scared of me?" he asked Michelle during one of their planning sessions. "Then you'll handle it the same way you always do," Michelle replied, "with grace and kindness. And you'll remember that most people are good, even if they don't always show it right away." His first school visit was at Jake's elementary school. Michelle had arranged for him to speak to Jake's class as a way to ease him into the experience with a friendly audience. Jake had been telling his classmates about the best storyteller in the world for weeks, so the children were excited to meet Marcus. When he walked into the classroom, there was a brief moment of silence as the children noticed his scars. Marcus felt his old anxiety rising. But then Jake jumped up from his seat and ran over to hug him. "Mr. Marcus, you came. Everyone, this is my friend who tells the amazing stories." The spell was broken. The children gathered around Marcus eagerly, asking questions about what story he was going to tell and whether it would have dragons or princesses or both. Their teacher, Mrs. Williams, welcomed him warmly and thanked him for taking time to visit. Marcus told the story of a young wizard who learned that his greatest power came not from magic spells, but from his ability to make others feel valued and understood. As always, he used different voices for each character, and encouraged the children to participate by making sound effects and answering questions throughout the story. After the session, several children came up to ask him questions. One little girl named Sarah touched the scars on his face gently and asked, "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore," Marcus answered honestly. "It used to hurt my feelings when people stared, but now I know that what matters is how we treat each other, not how we look." Another boy asked if Marcus had been in an accident. Marcus explained simply that he was born looking different, just like some people are born with different colored eyes or hair. The children accepted this explanation easily and moved on to more important questions about whether he knew any dinosaur stories. Mrs. Williams was amazed by how naturally Marcus connected with her students. I've had many guest speakers over the years, she told him afterward, but I've never seen children respond so positively to anyone. You have a real gift. Word of his successful school visit spread quickly. More invitations followed, and each one became easier than the last. Marcus discovered that children were the same everywhere, curious, accepting, and eager for good stories. The few times he encountered adults who reacted negatively to his appearance, he found that their children often corrected them, defending their new favorite storyteller. Michelle watched his confidence grow with pride and satisfaction. She had seen him transform from someone who hid in the shadows to a person who stepped boldly into the light, sharing his gifts with the world. Their friendship had become one of the most important relationships in both their lives. You know, she told him one evening as they cleaned up after a particularly successful Stories Under the Stars event. I think I learned more from you than you learned from me. What do you mean? Marcus asked, folding up the small chairs they had arranged in a circle. I learned that the way we see people says more about us than it does about them. That day on the bus, I saw someone I thought was different and decided he was less than human. But you saw someone who was hurting and decided to be kind anyway. You're a better person than I am. Marcus shook his head. We're just different people who both had to learn important lessons. I had to learn that hiding doesn't protect you from pain. It just keeps you from experiencing joy. You had to learn that first impressions aren't always right. We both grew. 2 years later, Marcus stood in front of a packed auditorium at the Children's Hospital, preparing to tell stories to an audience of young patients, their families, and medical staff. It was the largest crowd he had ever addressed, and for a moment he felt a flutter of his old anxiety. In the front row, he spotted familiar faces. Tommy, now 8 years old, was there with his mother and grandmother. Emma sat with her father, no longer the shy little girl who hid behind his legs. Jake was there too, smiling broadly and giving Marcus a thumbs up. And in the back row, Michelle sat with her camera, ready to document another milestone in Marcus's journey. The Children's Hospital had invited Marcus to be their featured speaker for their annual fundraising gala. Instead of the usual adult entertainment, they had decided to focus on what truly mattered, bringing joy to the young patients who spent so much time within these walls. As Marcus began his story about a brave little mouse who found courage in the most unexpected places, he watched the faces in the audience. There were children in wheelchairs, others with bandaged heads, some connected to portable machines. But as his story unfolded, all of those medical realities faded away. The children were transported to a magical world where anything was possible, and heroes came in all shapes and sizes. During the question and answer session afterward, a young girl named Maria raised her hand. She was probably about 7 years old and was wearing a colorful headscarf that couldn't quite hide the fact that she had lost her hair to chemotherapy treatments. Mr. Marcus, she said in a clear, brave voice. Some kids at my old school used to say mean things about how I look now because of my medicine, but listening to your stories makes me feel like it doesn't matter what people say about how we look. Is that right? Marcus felt his heart swell with emotion. That's absolutely right, Maria. What matters is the kindness in your heart and the courage you show every day. You're already a hero in your own story. After the event, Marcus was surrounded by families wanting to thank him personally. Parents told him about children who had been inspired by his visits. Kids who had found new confidence after hearing his messages about acceptance and kindness. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, the hospital's head of pediatric oncology, approached him with tears in her eyes. Do you have any idea what you've done here tonight? Some of these children haven't smiled in weeks. You gave them hope and joy when they needed it most. As the evening wound down, Marcus found himself standing in the hospital garden with Michelle, looking up at the stars. The same stars that had witnessed their first outdoor storytelling event, when he had been so nervous about performing outside the library. Remember when you thought you could never do this? Michelle asked softly. Marcus nodded, thinking back to that scared man who had hidden in the back room of the library, convinced that the world would never accept him. It feels like a different lifetime. What changed? She asked, even though she already knew the answer. I stopped trying to hide from the world and started trying to serve it instead. When I focused on what I could give rather than what I was afraid of losing, everything shifted. Michelle smiled. And now you're booked solid for the next 6 months. Schools, hospitals, community centers, even that children's book publisher who wants to record your stories as audiobooks. It was true. Marcus's reputation as a storyteller had grown far beyond their small town. The children's book publisher had heard one of his recorded stories and wanted to create a whole series featuring his voice. Several schools had asked him to consider becoming a full-time visiting storyteller, traveling between different districts. I never imagined any of this was possible, Marcus admitted. If someone had told me 3 years ago that hundreds of children would know my name and look forward to seeing me, I would have thought they were crazy. The children always knew who you really were, Michelle pointed out. Adults are the ones who had to learn to see past the surface. As they walked back toward the hospital entrance, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. It had started with pain and cruelty on a city bus, continued through fear and hiding, and somehow transformed into purpose and joy. He thought about all the children whose lives he had touched, and how much they had given back to him in return. They had taught him that acceptance wasn't something he needed to earn. It was something he needed to offer, both to others and to himself. The little boy who had gotten lost in the library that first day had led him to discover his true calling. The woman who had called him hideous had become one of his closest friends and biggest supporters. Every challenge had contained within it the seeds of something beautiful. As Marcus drove home that night, he passed the bus stop where his transformation had begun. For just a moment, he thought about that frightened man who used to hide behind scarves and pulled down caps. That man had been so focused on protecting himself from the world that he had almost missed out on the joy of connecting with it. Now, Marcus knew the truth that had taken him 30 years to learn. The world was full of people hungry for kindness, acceptance, and wonder. And sometimes the most unexpected person, the one others might look past or judge harshly, might be exactly the person they needed to meet. His phone buzzed with a text message from Tommy's mother. Tommy wanted me to tell you that when he grows up, he wants to be a storyteller just like you. Thank you for showing him that heroes come in all different ways. Marcus smiled as he pulled into his driveway. Tomorrow he would visit another school, tell more stories, and touch more lives. But tonight, he was simply grateful for the journey that had led him from hiding in the shadows to standing confidently in the light, sharing his gifts with a world that had turned out to be far more accepting and loving than he had ever dared to hope.